Okay, kids, I'm going to talk a little bit about sanding. This is the guitar we just put the binding on our top and our back here. And so I want to talk about sanding this for you, because there's a few things you got to watch out for. Again, doing the binding is one of the most critical aspects of the whole build, and I want to talk about how to sand this so that try to help you eliminate a big mistake that happens all the time when you're starting out as a builder. And again, some of you are more conscious and have more aptitude towards this sort of thing. I've gotten into trouble on several occasions with this. So that's how you learn. But let's talk about this. First, get your random orbital sander. I make mine adapt so that I can plug in one of my shop vacs to it this way and suck up the air. I'll take and put my hose on there, and I'll put a piece of duct tape around that. I'll usually put a little bend over part for a tab, and then just go ahead and tape that on there quickly like so. That's all you need for. So again, I adapt that. I've got some aluminum flashing at the Menards and constructed a way to adapt these two things. So when I turn on my vacuum, it really keeps the dust down, because these have the holes in them. So first of all, another thing you can do here on these tops, particularly on these flat surfaces, you can take your scraper blade and just go ahead and scrape these things. Put some stops here. So, you can really take that down quickly with the scraper blade, and that's a good way to start. And then come back with your random orbital and just clean up everything. Start to think about you're going to get ready for your final sanding, 220, and do a final sand before I'm putting my finish on. But you can also, if you don't have a scraper blade, you can sand this stuff down. Again, it's so close here that sanding works as well. So I'll show you just a bit of quick sanding on this top. I'm going to turn on my vac, and this thing's noisy. So there you go. You saw how quick I could sand this. I'm ready for my final sanding. But now what you want to do is you want to feel. So when you're sanding, always feel, and feel's going to tell you as much as anything. If you feel a little edge, you got to sand it more. The other thing you want to look for is any glue area that you want to get rid of. If you have glue any place on your build, when you go to finish it, the glue will telegraph through the finish. You'll see it every time. So make sure you sand every aspect of glue off of your work. Otherwise, when you go to finish it, it's going to pop up and you're going to be mad that it did that. And, then you're starting over by sanding and re-oiling. But anyway, there you go. I sanded that really quickly. But that's not why we're here. here's why we're here. This is why we're here. This is the tricky part. Again, as I told you before, I can sand this way, and I can change the height of this. Say from here might be a little lower than here, but my eye will not notice that. As I stand back and look at the guitar, I'm not going to notice if this is a little shorter here and this is a little taller here. Because of all the curves, it's not a straight line. Your eye doesn't notice that from this side looking at it, whether this is taller or shorter. But looking at it straight on, try and follow me here, looking at this straight on, if I get too thin here, the eye will see that. If your binding gets too thin in different places, thin this way, across the face, then the eye will notice that. So this is where you have to be really careful to keep the thickness, this little bitty thickness, 90 thousandths in this case, you got to keep that really close to being the same all the way around. Now when I feel this here, this all feels good, and as I told you when we routed this, I like to be a little proud with my wood to my binding. In other words, it's easier to sand my wood down to flush with my binding than if my binding is sticking up and I have to sand it down to meet the fleshness of the wood side. So you want to, when you're binding it, you want to get as perfect as you can here. But if not, and this I can feel I've got just a little bit of a rise on my binding here. And on this side that feels really good there. But here's the problem, people. Now listen to me. Look at my sander covers both of those areas of binding at the same time. And now if I've got some glue in here, and I take my sander and I start to sand that glue in there, and I'm worried about that, and I'm looking at that, all of a sudden, if I'm not real careful with these sanders, which cut fast, and if I would, and I'm going to exaggerate this, but if I do this too much, all of a sudden I've made this real thin here, and the eye will see that. That's noticeable. So the trick here is that you work and be careful that you're not going across those two areas of the binding, thinning them out so that when you look at it straight on, the eye will see that. So this becomes really tricky. You've got two areas you've got to be watching at the same time you're trying to get it some glue or sand something smooth in the middle. Now you could do this by hand, and that's safer, takes longer, but it's, I've done a lot of these by hand. And I've made some sanding jigs, which, let me show you one here. Here's something that I made out of a $3 plastic garbage can from the box store. And so it flex, and I just glue some sandpaper onto that. Now I've got and again, if I would put this in a vise of some sort, or some holding device here, now I've got something I can work. I can get down into my curves here and work that by hand. So these are neat. Again, this is nice because that's the rim of the garbage can right there, that round part, and it makes a nice handle. So I kept that on there, but it's just a piece of plastic that's flexible. Put some sandpaper on it and use that. It's great for corners. It's great for, coming around here. Again, I would put this in my vise and hold it and come around that way and sand. But I have gotten to the point where I can be fairly efficient with my random orbiter without getting into too much trouble, because I can lean up on the orbiter and keeping it off of the guitar. But you have to be careful. Again, if you're sanding flat here, by the way, I should have mentioned this, but as you're sanding, if you have a spot that you're working on, and you can tilt up you can tilt up and work it with the edge, but only for a second, and then you have to drop it down, flatten it out, and feather it out. Go back away from it. Do not stand here. Do not stay right in one. Do not stay right in one area and work and work and work. All of a sudden, you're going to have a divot. You're going to sand too much. So if you work an area that there's a problem, some glue or something, do a little bit for a second or two, then lay your sander flat and feather it out so that you're never making a divot in this stuff. So by the same token, now you can come here on the sides and you can work with just an edge of your sander and come in and start getting stuff out of there. This part right in the waist is the hardest to do with this, but particularly this part of this is fairly straightforward. You can work this and watch what you're doing, that you're not rolling either way there because you're going to mess up your binding, but you can do this fairly effectively with some practice. So I'll do a little bit this way and show you. Again, I'm not sure I'd recommend this, but it makes it quicker. And if you can get used to it, you'll be able to do this. I'll show you a little bit. Otherwise, I would hand sand this. I would recommend you hand sanding it. So you could see I was lifting one edge and working up to here, then lifting the other edge and working this way. Can you see that? So I've got this off, so I'm not doing that, and I'm working this side just right up to my binding and right up to the edge, or I'm dropping it down and working that, or I'm maybe taking the center and working through here. So with a little practice and being careful, you can do that. But when I look at my binding here, it's still intact. It's still the thickness that I want. So, you know, that's where you got to be careful, because you'll go through this wood binding in particular just as fast as can be. So be careful of that. So again, you're probably better off, you can take a sanding block like this and work these. Here when I'm sanding, I'm watching this edge all the time. I'm extremely conscious of not sanding too far this way. I'm trying to stay straight across here. And again, I'm just going to feel this. When it's smooth, you're done unless you've got some glue sticking out that you need to address. And if you had a little bit of glue, come in with some paper and just address a little area like that. The finer the grit, the easier it's going to be not to sand through here, because it takes more time. And once you've kind of if you can use this just as a rough cleanup, do all your finesse with hand sanding, certainly on these. Again, being careful not to run over your bindings on either side. But there I'm pretty close. Do all your final sanding here. By the way, do you guys know the trick? Cut your paper and then fold it into thirds. That keeps it from sliding. If you just fold it against itself, it slides all the time. So always fold your paper into thirds, like so, and then it'll grip itself. And then when you wear out a part, find open it up, find another section to do. So, see, there's a little glue there, and I can just take that real gingerly and get past that. So, and again, in here, you really have to do this by hand. I've seen some small pneumatic sanders, I guess the car guys have them, and that might work well to get in here. But I don't have a pneumatic system for sanding, and I've never seen a small little random orbiter like that. So here you're just going to come in and work by hand. That sort of a thing. Now, okay, I just finished sanding this back. It's all really nicely. But once I sanded it and could get all the glue off and everything, and I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but right in here, where the waste is, there's a little bit of a gap in there. Again, I don't know if you'll be able to pick that up. But it starts at about there and it goes to about there. And it's just a small gap. Now here's what you do with those kinds of gaps. And they're going to be common around all your binding. You're going to have places where you've got a little, where it just didn't seat quite right. And you're going to go around, you're going to look at everything. And if you've got any spot like that, where here's another one, there's a gap that runs right through here a little bit on this. Again, I don't know if you'll be able to see that. But here's the trick to filling those. You don't try and push putty into them. Putty looks like putty. But what you're going to do is, our best friend in the shop is super glue. And of course, what would super glue be without accelerator? This makes the super glue harden quick. Now here's the trick on something like this. Take your accelerator and spritz it first on the little gap there. And I'll show you why I want to do this way. I'm going to spritz a little on there. Let that burn off there, dry off. It evaporates real quickly. Okay, so once I've spritzed that and let that, then I'm going to take my super glue. And I'm just going to run it into this gap like this. And by having the accelerator blast that first, hopefully the accelerator goes down into the crack, and as the glue runs in there, it'll start to harden quicker. You want to fill that gap up, but you can't do that by just pouring. This is like water. Your super glue is like water, and it'll just keep running in there if it doesn't start to harden and become a barrier. So this is hard already because of the accelerator on it. Most of that crack is filled. There's a little low point here. I'm going to come back and just hit that like so again, and that came out fast. So I'm going to take a corner of my paper towel and just soak up some of that. I don't need that much on there, but I want to keep it in that crack, and then let that harden, which it's almost there. You'll see it harden, and there you go. It's hard already. So once I've done that, then I'm going to come back with my sander. Hit it with my sander. Boy, I don't know if you can see that, but here we go. That's where there was a little gap in there where my binding didn't just quite get glued against for whatever reason. It's probably glued not far down, but right there it wanted to stick out a bit. But what I just did, my accelerator, some glue, super glue, sanded off, and it's perfect. Nobody will ever know there was a gap there. What happens with super glue is it picks, unlike a putty, if you tried to mix up a putty even of this same wood, it's going to look like a putty you pushed in there. Do not do that. What the super glue does though, because it's clear, it picks up all the color around it and reflects that up through it. You can see through the super glue up into your surface, but it's the color of everything around it, so it looks natural. The worst case, it looks like a black line, but everything, now not here where we've got rosewood against rosewood, it's hard to see a line per se, but on something like this, where you've got white against a light, if you want to fill that with super glue, it'll pull out the light from the color of the wood itself. And again, even if it looks like a little bit of a black line, you kind of expect that because that's where a joint is. Believe me, it'll look great if you do it that way. If you try to, even inlaying a piece of the same spruce that's the same color in there, you can't inlay straight grain around a curve. You're always going to know that you put something in there. But by just filling it with super glue, it's going to pick up all the surrounding features, as it were, colors, as it were, and bring those to the fore. It's by far the best way to fill little gaps in your binding all the way around. So you're going to, once you sand everything, you're going to look for any little gaps and do that procedure I just showed you, where spritz it first, then let your super glue run in there, and then if you have to spritz it and build it some more, do that, but eventually it'll fill that and you sand it off to where it's flush. If there's still a divot in there, fill it again with super glue, sand it off. Once it's flush, it looks perfect. This looks perfect. Nobody would know the difference on this. Okay, so that's the process. No matter where on the guitar you have a little rough spot, even as a repairman, I do finish repair all day long, every day just about. I'm touching up a ding and a finish with super glue. That same method. I'll spritz it, I'll drop that super glue into the ding, and then sanding it with even up to 5,000 grit, and buffing it out. You'll always see the ding. You can't make it look like there's no ding, but you can. When you look at it in the light, it'll look flat and finished over. So, super glue is your friend. Learn to use it. By the way, the one thing, here's a problem with super glue and accelerator, and this is, you have to be careful with this, because if you take I don't know if you can see this, but if you take a drop of super glue and you have a big buildup of it, like I've got there. Should have got my accelerator ready first. And you put your accelerator on that, right onto the big glue. It often burns, and it will start to smoke. There it goes. Look at it burning. I don't know if you could see that. Often it smokes and it burns. And when it burns, it turns white. It's a white mess of the stuff. So here's why I accelerate first when I'm filling like we just did. If I had poured that super glue in there and then spritzed it with the accelerator, there's a good chance it would have burnt like I just showed you. And now you've got a white puddle down in the crack. Excuse me. Down in the crack. So then you got to take your X-Acto knife and dig all that white stuff out of there and start again. There's almost, I think, 90% less chance that it's going to burn if you accelerate first and then run your glue in there. It's not like it's a big puddle that you're just pouring your accelerator on. So always accelerate first, put your super glue in over that, and that'll give you the much better way to do this. If you put your super glue first and then accelerate, you're going to up the chances markedly that might burn, that puddle of super glue down in there would burn, cause it to turn white. Then you got to dig it out, start over again. So that's another trick with your accelerator and your super glue. Remember that one. Okay, kids. Now, as I was sanding the top of this rosewood guitar, I've noticed a little divot in the top right here, just that small space. Now, we just talked about putting super glue in cracks. On something like this, I wouldn't start out by putting super glue in that. I'm going to try and approach this from a different angle. And that angle is, the first thing I want to do is I'm going to put a drop of water in that divot and see. I'll take this X-Acto knife, I'll put some water on it, and I'll drop a little water right in there and see if that doesn't swell. The water will make this wood swell up and pucker up and take some of that divot out. But then from there, I'll probably just then sand it down and get rid of most of that. The problem with filling this sort of thing with super glue is it's going to show up as a little mark on your top, which you might be able to pass off as a knot, but it's a little something, a blemish of some sort. You're always going to see something like that when you repair it with anything. But I'm going to put water in there, see if it'll swell up, and then sand it back down, and I think I can get rid of most of that. Now, this is a good example of why you have to be careful when you're building. If you got anything on your bench, something, a piece of wood or something on your bench top, and you turn this over and you're sanding it and you ding it like that. So be careful of dings. Keep your workplace clean. And but if you have to try and approach something like that, try the water method first, and then see if you can't sand it out from there. Last case scenario is I would actually finish over that and then put some super glue in there and then some more finish over it to make it kind of blend in with the finish work. Not necessarily put super glue in it first while it's raw wood. Okay, kids, if you like and use or find these videos interesting, educational, informative, or maybe just entertaining because you're up late at night, we'd love to have you support us. There's a few ways you can do that. One is click the subscribe button below. That helps YouTube know what we're doing and that we're serious about this. Also, you can hit that bell icon, which tells you when the next videos are coming out. We're going to try and get at least one out a week now that we're up and running here. Also, a good way to support us is become a patron over at our Patreon account. And again, there's a link below for that. Patreon's a cool way that you can sign up and give, $5 a month or $10 or whatever you feel is worth it. If you're using these videos to actually build a guitar and find it interesting and fun, please support us through Patreon. That's I wish I could do this completely for free, but it takes money and time away from my other regular job. So it's a big undertaking, and any support you could send this way is great. So it's all been very fun so far for me, and I hope you guys are having fun at this as well, and we greatly appreciate all your support, so thanks.